Finding My Voice with Sallie Krawcheck, Chair of Ellevate Network and CEO and co-founder of Ellevest, and Valerie Jarrett, Senior Advisor at Obama Foundation and Attention.
I feel so far away. I'm coming over here
Join me
to hang out with you.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
You all look fabulous. You look so good out there, so many of you.
Out on a Friday afternoon in June.
Yeah, I'm
that?
impressed.
How about that? Okay. I have the good fortune of speaking with Valerie Jarrett, who needs no introduction. And I was thinking as we were sitting there about to come up that every time I see you, I feel the need to go deep fast and share with you because
That's why we're on a couch.
you have such an open manner, so much experience, so much wisdom. I was trying to think of an analogy that could make sense about who you have become in this world. And you have gone from being a self-described introvert to, I think, sort of the Beyonce for thinking women.
Whoa.
Right? I think that
has a ring.
Beyonce, for those of us who are trying to find our way, make our society better, make business better, who are feeling perhaps a little discouraged these days. So I want you to tell us what we should be doing and what we can be doing. But before we get there, it wasn't so long ago when you were what, in your late 20s, early 30s. Not so long ago, a few years.
Not long ago at all, just a minute ago.
And you were a little lost. You felt like you were maybe a failure. You were certainly an introvert. You didn't have the profile that you had today. The details of it, so many of us know, but how did you emotionally, psychologically get from here to the rock star and sometimes lightning rod that you are today?
Well, do I have to sing or can I just talk? And dance. I'll just talk.
Oh, I'd love to see the dancing.
Yeah, I bet you would. No, not dancing. Well, maybe when we're done, we'll dance a little bit. So I was very painfully shy as a young child, and I think perhaps some of it is because I was born on the other side of the world in Shiraz, Iran, and my parents traveled all over the world with me in tow, and I never quite felt like I belonged. I was different as a kid. I used to get teased for being from this country. First, no one had ever heard of it, and then everybody had heard of it. And so I kind of withdrew, and I was an only child, and so it was really safe in my own little fantasy world. And I stayed quite comfortably there, and I had a big extended family, and so I'd come out from time to play with my cousins. But mostly I was very self-contained and painfully shy. I mean, terrified of public speaking. I wouldn't have talked in front of 10 people, let alone this many people, even 30 years ago. And it was a slow work in progress. And I think part of why I wanted to write my book is because I think back about how I was when I was most of your age and the transformation I went through. That took a lot of hard work. It required me to get outside of my comfort zone and, in a sense, be comfortable being uncomfortable, which I think we shy away from doing intuitively. And I had to kind of hit rock bottom. Now, when I say rock bottom for a professional woman who had means, which is very different than rock bottom for a lot of women. But I had a 10-year plan coming out of school. I was going to go right to law school because I couldn't figure out what else to do. And I wasn't good at organic chemistry, and I slept through the GMATs, to be very honest with you. So I went to law school there was a really good party the night before the GMATs. I wish I had gone to business school, but my best friend was in law school. She said, go to law school. And I thought, well, everybody has a plan. I need a plan. Right to law school, figure out my passion in law, fall in love, get married, have a baby by 30, thinking about the biological clock. Fortunately, it ticks later now, so don't get nervous. Live happily ever after. And so I begin my book sitting in a very fancy office at a big corporate law firm, doing what everybody thought I should be doing, married to figuratively the boy next door, and that our moms had grown up together, and we'd known each other forever. I'd had a crush on him since I was 8 and he was 12. He paid no attention to me until I was 25. And when he did, I said, oh, I'm going to marry you. Because what could go wrong, right? Boy next door. Oh, so very much can go wrong. And so my marriage wasn't working. I had a new baby. I would leave her every day to go to a job that was completely unfulfilling. And I'd sit in my office and cry. And I thought I wasn't supposed to be this unhappy. And so a good friend of mine said, why don't you think about public service? You'll feel like you're a part of something more important than just you. And it changed my life. And I realized once I got over the fear of making a change outside of that, kind of arbitrary plan I had, that's where the adventure began. And it was in public service that I really discovered how to advocate on behalf of other people. So using my voice to advocate for others, but the first step was learning to trust my own voice. And it took me probably far too long to get to the point where, as opposed to listening to everybody else whispering about what should make Valerie happy, I figured out that marriage was not making me happy, that job was not making me happy, and public service did.
Yeah. We're so glad you did. Yes, thank
you.
You might also be the Beyonce of spotting young talent.
Okay, now I'm gonna own that one. I will own that one. That is true. Should we tell that story?
Tell us, please. I mean, I think we all want to hear about this.
So I will pat myself on the back. When this very, very confident 27-year-old woman named Michelle Robinson walked into my office for a job interview, who is right? I said, that girl's got talent. And I was just so impressed. She was so composed, and she saw her resume on my desk. She never mentioned a word that was in that resume. Instead, she told me her story, which is something I think we have to do, because you don't want people to just hire you because of what they see in terms of your credentials. You want to share with them who you are. And within about 20 minutes of her talking about the fact that she grew up on the south side of Chicago, working class family that instilled in her this value of education, even though her parents hadn't gone to college, and that she just lost her father and her best friend. And she said it made her realize life is short, and I better do something that I think is impactful. And then I opened up and told her about the loss of my cousin at an early age. And the next thing you knew, we felt like we knew each other. And then she turned the tables on me and started interviewing me. I was like, wait a minute. I work in the mayor's office. What are you doing? And I didn't have answers for any of her questions because I had just been promoted. And she made me increasingly uncomfortable. And so I thought, well, let me just give her a job offer so she stops asking me questions. Now, I had no authority to give her that job offer, but who was going to turn her down? She demurred wisely. And then a few days later, I was talking to her, and I said, well, what about that job offer? And she said, well, my fiance doesn't think it's such a good idea. And I said, well, who's your fiance, and what do we care what he thinks? And she said his name is Barack Obama, and he started his career as a community organizer, and he has some reservations about me going and working in the mayor's office, a very political job. Would you have dinner with us to talk it out? Wisely, I said yes. And it's interesting because a lot of people, when I tell this story, they go, well, isn't that odd that she needed to have her fiance right there at the table to think this through? And what I say to them is there isn't a decision he made in his career without her sitting right next to him. And that it was an indication of the partnership that they formed even before they got married. So yeah, I did spot some good talent in both of them that day.
What were the most important leadership lessons you learned from the two of them?
Well, first of all, remember, and this is public service leadership, remember that it is not about you, it's about service. And I am very glad that I started my career in public service on the local level, and I'm a big proponent of local government or volunteering at local organizations. And for me, the people you are serving are proximate. They follow you to the grocery store while you're trying to be in the checkout lane. They're talking to you about something. Or when I took my daughter to the park, or the dry cleaners. Even people tried to lobby my daughter for positions when she was like 6, and she'd come home and she'd go, I don't know what they were saying, but they were trying to get you to do so-and-so. And the proximity is important because it teaches you that public service is 24/7. And it is not easy, and it is not supposed to be. This is a big deal if you think that you should be in the position of serving other people and you learn to listen. And I think that proximity and learning to listen and realizing that it is our job to help people fulfill their dreams and the government should do what the private sector can't do on its own, that lesson helped me enormously when I went to Washington, as did being a young single mom with means, feeling like I was holding on my fingertips when I was young. I used to think, well, what about the working family where the parents are working 2 shifts, minimum wage, don't have a safety net of health care, don't have a safety net of child care, don't know whether they're going to be able to make their rent payment and buy food and take care of their families. And so if I'm holding on my fingertips, what on earth must it be like for them? Which is what made me so excited about chairing the White House Council on Women and Girls, where we really fought for gender equity and for working families to be able to thrive in this marketplace that we all try to live in today. So long way of saying, I came a long way once I figured out that service was really what my mission was all about.
Well, and it absolutely radiates from you.
I love it. I love it. And you don't have to be in government. Like right now, I am certainly not in government this minute, I can tell you that. I shudder to think. But the real change does happen on the ground. And then government is there to make it easier for you, but it is you all that should feel empowered to determine what kind of a country and a world we live in. What are our core values? What do we owe to one another, that social contract that makes us a society?
This is called Mobilize Women. What should we be doing? And I know the answer is vote before we vote.
Yeah.
What, the last election turned on women, on white women. And so there's an obvious answer there. But before we get there, what are there issues we should be focusing on particularly? Is there something beyond vote that you can charge us with?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, recognize the power of your voices. And I'll give you a perfect example. The Affordable Care Act would not be the law of the land today were it not for you. Because when they wanted to repeal it, you showed up. You went to town halls, you wrote your elected representatives, you told your stories about what it has done for your life. And that is the only reason why it hasn't been repealed. And so appreciate the value of your voice. For those brave women who are part of the founders of the Me Too movement, who came forward and told their stories, knowing they were going to get an avalanche of criticism, you had their back, and that enabled them to come forward and tell the most horrific things that had happened in their life on a public stage. And so we can be doing so much for one another. In the political environment, though, the reason I focus on voting is it is the most fundamental responsibility of citizenship. It's not the only one. And so I say get involved and find out, who are the people who are running for office? Do they reflect your values? Don't say they have to be perfect, because none of them are perfect. The people in your lives are not perfect that you've chosen to share your life with. Let's face it, none of us are perfect. Well, no, none of us are perfect. But who do you think has a vision for America that resonates with you? Who's going to protect your interests and the interests of your family? I mean, I am very worried about what is happening state by state with the erosion of a woman's right to choose. And I was alive and well and a teenager when Roe versus Wade was upheld by the Constitution, by the Supreme Court as constitutional. And now it's in jeopardy. And the lesson in that is that we have to be vigilant. You can't just show up once and vote. You have to find out what's going on each and every day in the community and hold your elected officials accountable. And look, everybody's busy. You got big, important jobs, I know that. But the power of your voice to influence the direction of our country, particularly at this inflection point, is critical. And look, you talk about women. Look at Doug Jones in Alabama. He's the senator today because of black women who turned out and voted for him. And so you can be in the minority and still have a huge voice. 43% of eligible voters did not vote in the last presidential election. Just imagine if they had, when you consider Hillary Clinton won the majority of the votes, only lost in 3 states by less than 100,000 votes. So there is a lot that we should be doing to be good citizens, to be good individual citizens, to be good corporate citizens, and to appreciate the fact that when one person stands up and says something, it can have a ripple effect. And so be that one person.
I love that.
Be that
All
one
right.
person, all of y'all.
Do we have time for a couple questions? All right, time for just a couple of questions. What do we have?
And we can't see you, so be loud.
Do this. You know what, I just noticed we're wearing the same.
works.
Did you notice we're
I did.
sort of twins?
I noticed that before we came out.
Yeah, I just
because I'm
noticed that.
Beyonce, so I know these things.
That's amazing. All right.
So I have a question here for Valerie.
Where are
How
you?
would you decide which organizations in your network were the best fit for certain projects that you worked on, given that there are so many organizations with similar traits established in the United States?
What was the first part? I didn't hear the first part. Did you hear the first part?
It's a big one. How would you decide which organizations in your network were the best fit for certain projects?
You know what? Do your homework, do your due diligence, see which ones are led by people of character and integrity, people who share your values, and get in there and start. And you're going to figure out pretty quickly whether you think you can make an impact. So it's not only important that the organization is one that is reputable and able to make progress, but you want to make sure you can move the needle. And at this stage of my life, I have the luxury, and please don't hate me for this, but I wake up every day and I do exactly what I want to do. And the liberation and fear that comes with that, because now if I have a bad day, whose fault is it? I got nobody to blame but me. But it allows you to pick and choose, and so I pick, where do I really care about an issue, and do I think I can actually do something to move the needle? And if you use that as a litmus test, and then you can change your mind. You can start out, and if you don't like it, switch.
Yeah, that's great. Other question?
Yeah, this one I'd like to pose to both of you. How do you critically analyze conflicting opinions from members in your network without additional biases? And have you been able to use these conflicting opinions to ultimately create shared valued decisions?
Well, a big part of my life was taking people who had totally opposite points of view and trying to get them, number one, to listen to one another, to learn from one another, to feel a sense of empathy with one another, put themselves in the other person's shoe, and see if you could move them a little bit closer together. And one of the challenges, I think, in leadership is to ensure that you are empowering the people around you to tell you what they think, to open up and be honest in a safe place. And I think that's also critical, is you've got to create an environment where people who have been disagreeing with each other for decades or generations, which was often the case, to say, okay, I actually can sit here and listen to you and be civil about it and take the tone down a bit. And I think my undergraduate degree in psychology helped me try to set a mellow tone and get people to feel comfortable, but you have to give people permission, explicit permission, to be honest and be open and know that they will be okay.
I want to interject with one, because I mentioned earlier, given the nature of what you've done, you can be a lightning rod.
Beyonce's not our lightning rod.
How do you go forward? Does that hurt? Or how are you able to process it and keep on and keep showing up in such a positive, forward-looking way?
A few things. So first of all, I was well loved. I had the good fortune of two parents who loved me unconditionally and who gave me this sense of place and history, and I come from a family of trailblazers, and they shared that rich history with me to see that the possibilities are infinite, and that if I did stumble and fall, which I did obviously do quite a bit, they could pick me back up. And so coming from good stock like that, I think, was also very helpful. But the other thing that I learned along the way is that you do have to learn how to absorb pain without it debilitating you or crushing your soul. And I think public service, if you can rise up to and accept the fact that it's not about you and the fragility of your feelings, but it's actually about what you can do as a force for good for others, that's a noble feeling. And so it's a lot easier to take incoming fire when you think you're doing something that has an important purpose. But you also have to learn how you shouldn't just tune out the criticism, because sometimes you learn something from it, and you've got to learn to filter, well, who's just crazy and who actually has a legitimate concern. And so I read the comments. My daughter keeps saying, don't read the comments on social media, but I'm always kind of curious as to what people are thinking, and I'm worried. I can take it. So I have a pretty tough skin, but I think a lot of people aren't. And I worry that, so for example, depression is going up in high school and college-age kids. And psychiatrists will tell you that social media can have this isolating impact. You're holding yourself up to comparing yourself to the perfect sense of someone else. And people hide behind the anonymity, and the coarseness of the language can be quite destructive. So I encourage everybody to be careful how you speak on social media. There's a person behind that handle. But I think also it's just like practice. The more people get mad at you and they yell and they scream at you, you do learn to kind of take it in stride. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. And I think for those who pretend it doesn't hurt, yeah, it does. Everybody's human. But you have to just rise above it and say, I'm going to live to fight another day, and recognize that you have to take the long view. It's kind of how I feel about this point in our nation's history. As traumatized as I am by it, I am really optimistic because I've seen so many people who still care about this country and want to change its trajectory in a positive direction. And so when you see all of the good out there, it makes it a little bit easier to stomach some of the bad.
Valerie, thank you for your service to this country. Thank you for being here today. The Thinking Woman's Beyonce.
I like that title. Thank you, Sallie. Thank you, everybody.